that's why I like this Edinger so much, is because he's shown what the end is, and that is, okay, how can you combine the opposites when the opposites are butting heads all the time? And the answer is through the medium of yourself, right?
In Western philosophy, it came through Hegel, and that's when they talked about thesis, antithesis, and
synthesis. Right.
And it's that's that sort of idea.
It is
Though
that
he
idea.
never said those three terms.
No, but Edinger did, because I have it in these notes.
Yeah.
Okay, which these notes are in the Dropbox if you haven't seen them already. But
and it's also like
enantiodromia.
Yeah, because that is where you flip from one to the other, and in fact, when you do flip from one to the other, you really become both, because you don't just exclude one and run to the other exclusion.
Right, you become both. That's right.
You flip to the other, and then you go, oh, and you pull in the opposite. So
yeah,
and it's
a flow back and forth. So it's a living.
Well, no, I think it's more like it becomes something else, and that's where the three comes in.
Right. In big strokes, I think that what Edinger is saying is that we represent the living God, right? And so if we think of ourselves as human beings as the living God, and humanity itself as this living God that's coming into consciousness, and we're the carriers of consciousness, and as a species we're actually God coming into consciousness, if you think of it that way. It subtly changes the way you look at the world. Okay? Because now you say to yourself, well, what would God do? Right?
Yahweh?
No, not Yahweh, not the self. It has to be the self modulated by the ego, right? The self, the Yahweh doesn't have to live in the 21st century. We do, right? This is what we've said over and over again, that our basic psyche doesn't have to live in the 21st century, but we do. And so when we're born, we have the basic psyche, and then we start to act out. And it's only by pain that we start to become individuals instead of this creature that's just in the flow. Like the eagle mama out in Decorah, Iowa, she's not thinking about it, okay? It's not an ego thing for her. It's just instinct, She's sitting on those eggs, and by God, she's going to sit on those eggs. And she would sit on them until she froze to death. If there was a really bad storm, I remember a storm up at Hamilton College where for a week it was under 30 degrees below zero. Okay, well, if that storm suddenly surprised that eagle mama out there in Iowa, she would sit there until she froze to death, because that's what her instinct tells her to do, right? And so babies, when they're born, are all Yahweh. They're all instinct. They're all archetypal energy. And then they have to develop an ego, and that ego is only developed by pain, by learning. And learning is painful, right? And so you have the Job cycle all the time. So he says, as Jung says, the heavy burden the hero carries, all of us carry, in himself, or rather the self, his wholeness, which is both God and animal, not merely the empirical man, but the totality of this being, which is rooted in his animal nature and reaches out beyond the merely human toward the divine. Okay. After each theft of a secret, okay, which is Prometheus, the light bringer, right? He stole a secret. Okay, so after each theft of a secret, which he calls an increase in consciousness, is the theft of a secret. The sun is buried in the earth, weighed down with the burden of responsibility that the new consciousness opposes, which causes depression. This is a necessary and repeated process. Father and son or daughter are parts of a perpetual cycle drama of theft, burial, resurrection, which is the equivalent to the incarnation of God in the human ego. Motivated by the autonomous urge to individuation, which is the Holy Ghost. He calls this urge to individuation as the Holy Ghost. The ego must strive to know the self and to realize it consciously. As Jung says, individuation means practically that he, man, becomes adult, responsible for his existence, knowing that he does not only depend on God, but that God also depends on man. Okay, so once again, this is morality versus ethics, and it's the distinction between, ethics is conscience, morality is law, so that doesn't require any conscience, you just follow the law, right? Until I read Jung's essay on conscience, I really never thought about it either.
No, I thought about it. I just never thought to read him about it.
Yeah, but did you make the distinction between morality being law, like the Ten Commandments or all the laws in the courthouses, and ethics being a conscious decision?
Well, I always thought they were kind of phony arguments.
As compared to what?
Well, because it seemed to me that in order for anyone to individuate, you had to follow a path that was uniquely your own, and so in order to say it would have a law or an ethics involved, if I was ethical, or if I was ethics, just means I'm an ethical guy. There's rules at work. If I follow the rules and do everything according to the rules, I'm an ethical guy. I'm a moral person if I follow that inner law that comes from within me. And if I'm Hitler and I'm supposed to kill millions of people, I'm following that moral law, then that's so.
Okay, well,
that's the way I
Jung
saw
has
it.
it reversed. Yeah.
Well,
Jung has
it was wrong, but it's
Well, I think of morality as a societal code that's sanctified in commandments or whatever.
Well, see, that's the one that when I studied a lot of philosophy, and I didn't like morality.
Mhm.
I didn't like
I think that's
ethics
why
and
most people
morality
think
because I
that.
thought they were all bogus. Because everybody got the words so mixed up, and nobody could talk a straight line through any of it. I just said, I don't want to even talk to you. I don't want to talk about it.
Okay, well,
So I'll stop talking. You go ahead.
I mean, I don't care what your definition of it is, right?
Well, that's just it. Morality comes from within. Ethics is you follow some applied law. If Jung is the opposite of that, good.
Yeah, I mean,
We're in the same world.
we're in the same world. We're just using different words for it.
So what would you consider monogamous marriage versus
Just a stupid rule.
rules?
Well, I mean that's following the rules, which
The ethics for me.
for you that would be ethics, but for Jung it would be morality.
Now, if I stayed in a monogamous
That's what I see.
relationship because that came from within me, then that would be a moral decision. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't just be following the societal standards or something.
So what gets screwed up is when that rule book changes all of a sudden.
Well, absolutely, right. I mean, when
So then what do you do?
well, when the president of the United States throws away the rule book to become president, then what do we
And
have?
then you left him because he did it.
Well, and he's
Well, he's got a rule book, but it's a rule book of the other 50% of the country that didn't support the previous one.
right, but there's some rules that I think even that 50% doesn't go along with him breaking. Okay, they may have other reasons for wanting him to be elected, but some of those broken rules maybe are not so cool, especially to women, right? And so, you know, women have fought for a long time to get a certain amount of respect, right? They thought they were on their way. You know, they thought since Susan B. Anthony started in 1860, and she never saw the vote. She worked on women's right to vote for 57 years. And at the end of her life, she said went up on the stage and people were throwing roses at her. And she said, when I first started to do this, people were throwing other things. Right? So anyway, Susan B. Anthony never saw women win the vote. But, you know, modern women, 21st century women, especially women of our age, have seen a lot of change vis-a-vis respect for women. But now they've seen that all broken. That vessel has been broken, and it has to be rebuilt. Does it not? I mean, we can't go back.
I
mean,
hope not.
huh?
I hope not.
Well, there's a pretty severe backlash right now against feminism going on.
Let me read one more
Is it snowing?
One more paragraph. The Messianic Age signifies psychologically the coming of the self, the achievement of individuation. As the legend puts it, the primordial psyche becomes food for the pious. In other words, it will be transformed and humanized as it is assimilated by the ego under the guidance of the self. Okay, and so that's the fundamental concept. So great, I got to page 3 of 12 pages. Edinger's big discussion about Answer to Job is in this book, Transformations of the God Image.